Shout out to both 𝗵𝗄𝗅 and Peak on Twitter for using my code on G Fuel's website. If you'd like to support the channel and do the same, check the link in the description. Thank you and enjoy the video. Master Vow of the Disciple is definitely a thing that exists, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say about it. Today's video is going to be all about what I have to say concerning the topic, and I hope to provide a solid base of constructive criticism for Bungie to hopefully better the game moving forward. To be honest, Bungie has no idea who I am, but I thought it would be fun regardless. I haven't done a demonjoe's thoughts commentary video since the 30th anniversary, and given how passionate I am concerning in-game PvE, and honestly how much I like the new raid, I figured now was time to step up and spark a discussion. I've done Master Vow from beginning to end 2 times thus far, so I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on the topic, so without further ado, let's just jump into it. For those that either haven't played Master Vow as of yet, or been on Destiny Twitter at least somewhat, you probably don't know the common consensus on how the community feels about this new difficulty option for Vow. Allow me to spoil it for you. It's not good. And I gotta say, in my opinion, the reaction that the community is having is 100% justified for a multitude of reasons, but I feel like it boils down to one central thing. Bungie isn't listening. And I want to be clear here, I truly mean this in no disrespectful way, but seemingly, Bungie just clearly isn't listening to community feedback, and it's very apparent via the actions, or lack thereof, that they've been taking. Now, when Master VoG came out, what did the community tell Bungie in regards to criticism? Well, first up, everyone seemingly agreed that they didn't like the champion spam and the match game modifier being the sources of difficulty in Master Mode, as it just felt too cheap and artificial. The second thing was that adept weapons didn't really feel like a proper reward for completing Master VoG, as they're just too similar to the normal mode counterparts. And finally 3, the only real incentive that people had to run Master VoG was to either get the title, or only run the encounter featuring the weekly challenge so that they can get the adept weapons for the week. So let's break down each of these criticisms and see how Bungie improved Master Mode for Vow of the Disciple as a result. First, people didn't like the champion spam and match game modifier, as it felt like a pretty cheap way to increase difficulty. Many even suggested to just apply contest modifier and to not change anything else. So what did Bungie do? Well, they did the exact same thing that they did with Vault of Glass. Master Vow of the Disciple is riddled with champions at just about every corner, and this time it feels much more egregious than Vault of Glass ever did. In the first encounter, we have our usual unstoppable abominations in the central area, but the enemies in the side rooms that need to be killed for callouts have now all been turned into overload champions. In the second encounter in the caretaker room, there are overload hobgoblins that consistently spawn over the course of the fight that have potential to one-shot you and your allies if not taken care of quickly. In the third encounter, every single glyph keeper that you kill is either unstop or overload, and with half the team carrying relics and whatnot, that combined with the match game modifier just makes it an absolute headache to play through. And lastly, for the Rulk encounter, you only have to deal with champion glyph keepers at the start of the totem phase, so it really doesn't feel too different from the normal mode. Regardless, the community has given constant feedback about champions and raids just not feeling good, and Bungie has seemingly ignored that feedback and have continued to fill Master Mode raids with tons of champions to increase the difficulty. Better yet, they decided to spam a bunch of overload champions into Vow during a season of overload auto rifle and SMG, which just feel awful to use. So yeah, you can kind of see why people don't like this one bit. Moving on, the next criticism that people had with Vault is that the adept weapons just didn't feel worth the grind compared to the normal mode weapons, as they're mostly the same. So what did Bungie do? Well, they actually made adept weapons worse in Master Vow comparatively to Vault of Glass. You see, back in Vault of Glass, if you got an adept weapon, each one would roll with a guaranteed set of perks, with 2 random perks rolling below it as well. This resulted in instances where no matter what, let's say you got an adept Fatebringer, it was going to have a PvE god roll that was guaranteed, and it would also feature bonus perks that you could swap to, which was just an overall great feeling. In Master Vow, however, that curated perk roll doesn't exist for any of the weapons, and the weapons that you get have 4 random perks on them, 2 for each of the last 2 columns. And this isn't inherently bad until you realize that those perks can't drop as enhanced perks, and with the new crafting system, this is a big deal. Aside from 𝗨's adept weapons having extra perk slots and an adept mod slot, its adept weapons are just worse versions of the normal mode weapons that you can craft at the Enclave. Not only that, but currently, if an adept weapon drops for you as a red box, completing its resonance objective won't even give you progress for crafting the normal version of the weapon. So granted, this has been confirmed a bug, but it's just a huge oversight that shouldn't have even happened. The last bit of criticism that Master Vault got was that the only real incentive to run it was either just to get the title and dip out, or to get a checkpoint for the weekly challenge and just do that on all your characters for the weapon and then call it quits. Sometimes players would want to do the Atheon encounter and on top of this buy adepts from the end chest, but with 𝗨, that's not even a thing thanks to adepts just being worse than their crafted counterparts, and nobody even cares one bit when they get an adept to drop anymore. So you can see, people are fairly mad because their voices seemingly just haven't been heard. All signs point to that being the case, maybe outside of Bungie lowering the recommended power level, because this time it's around 10 lower than usual. But aside from that, we've seen zero improvements and only regressions. I'm probably not going to do myself any favors with Bungie by saying what I'm about to say, but I pride myself on not really having that much of a filter on my channel, so I'm just going to say it. While scrolling Twitter yesterday, I came across a tweet from 𝗂𝗘 that was quoting a 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 tweet, and 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 was talking about the adept raid weapon bug with the patterns not getting progress, and 𝗂𝗘 responded saying, "Holy mother of half-baked. Master 𝗨 is giving D2 launch trials a run for its money on which ship the most raw." Now, DMG, the community manager for Bungie, then responded to this tweet saying, "Looks like this is a known bug on our side, fix coming in a future update." He said, "Request on my side though, hit us with specifics. Hot takes like half-baked or raw don't give us much to dive into when identifying points of frustration or areas in which players would like improvements." Now look, what DMG said isn't wrong whatsoever. His job is to gather feedback to then give to the developers of the game so they can improve on what the community doesn't like. But there's one central problem here. The criticism that the community has been giving Bungie regarding Master 𝗨 is the exact same criticism we gave during Master 𝗏𝗏, which is also very similar criticism to that which we've been giving raids for years ever since D2 first ever launched. Bungie just isn't listening and improving on what we've been saying, and that's why the community is in uproar. People wouldn't be this mad if they didn't have high expectations, and given we all gave them plenty to go off of after Master 𝗏𝗏, everyone is completely in their own right to have had those expectations. It's just very frustrating to me to see DMG request valid criticism when said valid criticism at this point in time is literally no different than the criticism that we've already given them a ton in the past. That being said, regardless, I still want to give Bungie my critiques of Master 𝗨 in hopes that maybe they listen this time around to improve the future raid difficulty releases. So Master 𝗨's main issue at the moment is the lack of incentive to do it. So here's what I propose to make this difficulty option something that people may actually want to run. First up, we need actual gear that is worth grinding for. In my opinion, an adept weapon should always outclass a crafted weapon if a crafted counterpart exists for said weapon. For example, adept submission should always be better than a crafted submission, but this sentiment wouldn't matter for say Shayura's Wrath because it can't be crafted and therefore it doesn't have a crafted counterpart. Now, to accomplish this, adept weapons should roll with enhanced perks to give them the overall edge over crafted weapons. You see, adept weapons would then be easier to farm as god rolls since they already have 4 total perk slots, and they'd benefit from the stat increases from masterworking and also have that adept mod slot. Those last two things on their own don't do much to make adepts incentivizing, but having 4 enhanced perks that can be swapped out on the go on top of that definitely makes me want to grind them out over spending time in 𝗁𝗏 to level 1 that would be worse instead. Next, this shouldn't stop at just weapons. Bungie should also introduce more avenues for Artifice Armor in Destiny, starting with Master 𝗨, but don't let it end there. You see, Grasp of Avarice was a great introduction to grinding Artifice Armor, but I don't think identical looking armor with the Artifice tag is enough, and I don't want to see Artifice Armor only stay to Master Dungeons. Perhaps what they should do is they should do something like with Prestige Leviathan and make the master version of 𝗨's armor look like an overall upgraded and flashier version of the base normal mode set while also having that Artifice Armor bonus. Next, we need more cosmetic incentives in regards to running in-game content. Look at Trials of Osiris. People to this day only go flawless for a chance at getting the ship or either of the two sparrows. Nowadays, Bungie introduced mementos as a means to further provide incentive to chase that golden chest, so why not do that for Val the Disciple? The lack of a raid memento that features a title, shader, and maybe a raid kills tracker is just a huge missed opportunity, and it would be an awesome item to go for week after week to put on our weapons. The last piece of criticism I have is Bungie, please fix your sparrow situation. I think it's really cool that you spent tons of time on the Master Val Sparrow, giving it its own unique look, the caretaker-based contrail, but having it be objectively worse just like every other Sparrow to always on time, from both a perk and speed perspective, is just sad. It gives me no desire to even consider equipping it, and it makes it as a reward for my first ever Master completion, just a disappointment completely, as opposed to Master Vogue, which had one of the cooler ships I think I've ever seen in this game as a reward, and that loading screen cosmetic definitely gets a lot more use than this Sparrow. And I guess as a final thing to add, Bungie, if you can't think of anything better than champion and modifier spam for future releases of Master Mode raids, and you don't want to do the traditional D1 hard mode difficulties, please consider just slapping on contest modifier as the master mode in the future and calling it a day. I know a lot of people have already asked for this because they want to be able to practice for future contest raids, and I just think it would be 1,000 times more fun as opposed to seasonal mods determining my loadout every few months whenever I load into the raid because of champions. With all that said, that's pretty much all I have to say concerning the topic. People as a whole, including myself, are just a bit pissy right now due to the end of season woes, you know? The DLC has been out for a bit, the season is coming to a close, and we're all just looking for something to grind in the game. Bungie finally releases an activity that we may find interesting, and what do? They somehow extract everything replayable from said activity and turn it into something that people do once a week at most to get the title, and then never again. If Bungie doesn't implement any of my critiques into Val the Disciple's Master Mode, I sure hope they do it for future releases. But what do you guys think? It's very abnormal that I make videos of this nature, so I'm curious to what you all have to say in the comments. Let me know what you thought of my critiques, maybe what you do differently, or just how you feel about the current state of these Master Mode raids right now. As always, thanks to my patrons on Patreons for supporting the content, and shout out to my tier 2 patrons, 𝗏𝗛𝗡, John, 𝗏𝗵𝗡𝗍𝗏, and Crunchwrap, as well as my tier 3 patrons, Neon, 𝘁𝗵𝗄, Austin, and 𝗏𝗚𝗓𝗡. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.